Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Pantry the Plate. I'm Kristen Elliott, your friendly food-based dietitian, and I'm so excited, as I always say, that's always in the script, to talk to you today about mushrooms. So mushrooms are in season currently, growing in Georgia, but you can find them year-round at your grocery store. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple of ways you can incorporate mushrooms into your meals. One way hides them, and the other way brings them to the front and highlights them. So mushrooms are a very nutritious vegetable. They fall into the vegetable category when we talk about foods and sort of how they're grown. But technically, mushrooms are not vegetables, they're a fungi. So they are in a completely different classification category than vegetables. But when we talk about nutrition, they're most similar to vegetables, so we're going to call them vegetable. So let's get started on our recipes today. I've got 2 pans going over here. In my black cast iron skillet, we're going to be making chicken and mushrooms. And then in the stainless steel over here, I'm going to show you how to make a blend of meat, ground meat, and finely chopped mushrooms. And you can turn that into a variety of different dishes that use this ground meat. Today, I'm going to show you how to make meatballs. So these meatballs are going to be universal in flavor, so you can cook them up and put them in your freezer and take them out for any type of dish. You can make spaghetti. You can use them in a stir fry as your protein, and they will soak up the flavor of any sauce that you use. So let's get started. I've already done some pre-work, so we stay on time today here. So first thing that you will do with your chicken and mushrooms dish is you will go ahead and brown your meat first in the pan. So you have the opportunity to choose dipping your chicken in a seasoned flour mixture, or you can leave out the flour and just season your chicken with the spices. Today I did the seasoned flour mixture. So I used a whole grain flour, some salt, pepper, garlic powder, and thyme. Thyme and mushrooms, the flavors are like a match made in heaven. So those are really great flavor combo. So what you'll do is you'll just dip your chicken in your flour mixture and set it to the side while you prep the rest of your ingredients. So the rest of your ingredients are going to be 2 onions sliced. You can dice this up really fine if you prefer that, but this recipe is for, or calls for, like long skinny slices. And then we're going to be using cremini mushrooms or baby bellas. So I learned this today. I've always called these little brown mushrooms bellas, baby bellas, but they're actually creminis, which is a different type from portobello mushrooms. So this is about 12 ounces of mushrooms. So in terms of how they come from the grocery store, that would be one of the larger packages and one of the smaller packages. This 1 pound. Nope, I got that backwards. 3/4 of a 1 pound package. My bad. I've had so many mushroom packages here today, I got myself confused. So what we're going to do first, chicken's ready to go. So now we're going to take the same pan where we ground our chicken, and we're going to add our onions, and then we'll add our mushrooms and garlic after onions get the opportunity to cook for just a few minutes. So here's your onions. So you do want to use the same pan when you ground your chicken. You'll be able to soak up all the flavor from the chicken that was previously there. And you're going to let this cook for a couple of minutes until your onions start to turn clear. You may notice that you'll see some bits of stuck on chicken from the bottom of the pan, and that is what we call fond, F-O-N-D. And that is where you're going to get a lot of flavor. So leave that there. Okay, so while these onions start, I'm going to start my blended mushroom recipe in the other pan. I'm going to heat it just a little bit. So when you make a mushroom blend with ground meat, it's a good idea to cook your mushrooms first. So for this particular recipe, I'm going to make the the meatballs. So I'm using ground beef today with my mushrooms. So this recipe is 1 pound of ground meat and 1/2 pound of mushrooms. So at the grocery store, it's the smaller square package, 8 ounces of mushrooms. You can often find them already sliced, or you can find them whole, and when they're whole, they're just a little bit cheaper. For this, you want to chop your mushrooms really fine. So you can use a food processor or a little mini chopper if you have that. If not, you can slice your mushrooms up and then use a rocking motion with your knife across the top to get them into a small texture. You want them to be similar size to your ground meat. So for this particular recipe, I'm going to do it my way, which is cook the mushrooms and the onions and the garlic all together in the pan. The recipe says to just cook the mushrooms and then make the raw onion and the raw garlic into the meat. So I want to give them a little bit of cook because that boosts the flavor of the mushrooms and it will soak up the onion and the garlic with it. So in my stainless pan, here's my mushroom, onion, garlic mix, and I'm going to get it browning. There we go. Okay, we've got our mushroom onion mix at a medium-ish heat. As your mushrooms start to cook, they're going to release water. So you may notice that water accumulation in the pan, even if you didn't salt them first. It's natural part of the cooking process. So that is completely normal. It's going to add to your flavor. So we've got our onions cooking here for our chicken and mushroom dish. I'll give it just another minute and then go ahead and add the rest of my mushrooms. I'm actually going to turn this heat up just a little bit. There we go. You do not have to use a cast iron pan here. You can use any pan that you have on hand. I chose to use the cast iron because it's a little bit bigger than my other pans, and I'll be able to fit all of my chicken back on top of the dish at the end. So, mushrooms. You're either a fan of mushrooms or you're not. There's often not an in-between preference there. And I hear a lot that mushrooms have a bad reputation for texture. So if that is your opinion and you have tried them and you're like, no, I don't really like the texture, they're slimy, they're a little gummy, that's totally fine. This blended recipe for the meatballs might be a little bit up your alley because you won't have the texture of the mushrooms at all. You'll get the flavor and mix it in with the meat really well. There's so many different varieties of mushrooms. And here at the food bank, we most commonly see our creminis or the brown baby bellas, and then the white button mushrooms. I have seen portobellos before. So those are the big round cap that's really flat and brown like the creminis. And with those, you can treat them like a burger patty, or you can top them off with some like a meat sauce and some cheese on top. And it could be like a little serving dish for whatever you like to stuff it with. Those portobellos are also really nice to slice. Long ways, you have nice strips, and you could mix that into a stir fry or use a little bit less steak in a recipe if you're doing a stir fry, and you can substitute the steak with the mushrooms. So the mushrooms are going to help you use a little bit less meat and stretch the meat that you do use for a few additional servings. So our meatballs with our 12 ounces of mushrooms and our 1 pound of meat is going to give us 20 meatballs, and a serving size for that is 3 meatballs. So you'll be able to feed almost 7 people one meal with 1 pound of meat and 1 package of mushrooms. So just keep that in mind. Your blend, your mushroom ground meat blend, can be used for any recipe that uses ground meat. So you can use this as a base for your spaghetti, your meat sauce. You could use it as your mixture for tacos, nachos, you name it. So you've got a lot of leeway here, and I'm probably missing quite a few things that use ground meat that you know and that you're like, that's going to be a good idea to try to incorporate some more vegetables. I'm going to go ahead and add my mushrooms here to my onions so they can start to get cooking. So the mushrooms do shrink in size as they cook. So my pan looks super full right now, but they will reduce down, and then we'll have a beautiful layer of mushrooms and onions on the bottom. There we go. So I did slice these. I just sliced them up, and they look kind of big now, but like I said, they will reduce in size. You can also chop them really thin and chop up your onions really thin, and that will mix in really easily into your sauce that's going to come together at the end of this dish. Okay, let's get these all mixed in. Everybody is touching the onions. There we go. Okay, so check on our mix. It doesn't take long for this mix to come together because you don't have to cook the onions completely. You just want those mushrooms to release some water, and then they're good to go. Okay, so let's talk about our meatball mixture here. So I've got my ground meat. I have made half of this recipe already. It's in the oven. I'll show you in just a couple minutes. I've got half a pound here. Other half is in the oven. So you mix with your mushroom, onion, garlic mix, and your meat. You're going to use breadcrumbs. So this is 1/4 cup. Whole recipe calls for 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle that over the top of my meat. And then the whole recipe calls for 1 egg. So this is about 1/2 of an egg, as close as it could get. You might notice that I will not add any salt to this meatball recipe. So when we use breadcrumbs, even if they're unseasoned, they typically will come with salt. Bread itself is generally going to have a significant amount of salt. So your breadcrumbs are going to be exactly the same. So take that into consideration before you add any salt to your mix. And it also depends on how you plan on serving them. So if you're going to do a stir fry, and your flavor is really nice and basic here, you have a little bit more wiggle room with like the sauce and the salt that is in your sauce. If you don't add any sauce to this, so they will soak up the sauce and then you'll have a nice little flavor going on. Okay. So for that, we've got beef, breadcrumbs, egg, and then we will take our blend and we'll let it cool for a minute, and then we'll mix it together with this, and then you will divide it into 10 meatballs. For the whole recipe, it's 20 meatballs. So you don't have to be really specific about your measurements. You can just take your nice little spoon and just go plop, 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 plop until you have 10, and then whatever you have left over in your bowl, take a lick at your little mounds that you have left and add a little bit until they're all evened off. They don't have to be perfect. So I'm going to go grab my blend and add it to my meat mixture, and then I'm going to show you what the final product looks like. So I'm going to grab my gloves. It's not too hot over here. All right, so this is my cooked mixture. Yeah, show up. Here it is. That's the onions and the mushrooms and the garlic all nice and cooked together. It is steaming there. Okay. I'll go ahead and add this to my meat. So at this moment, this makes this hot, but I would traditionally use my hands to do the mixing completely. But since it's nice and hot, I'm gonna not burn myself. I'm just gonna use my spatula. Everything smells so good. The savoriness of the mushrooms is just a great way to add flavor without incorporating too much salt into your meals. Those mushrooms are going to soak up whatever flavor you give it, and it will just be so delicious. Mushrooms are one of my favorite foods. They pair together really well. So here's the mix. This is my mushroom and meat mix, right? And so what we'll do is we'll take this and we'll divide it into meatballs, and then we'll put them in the oven. So you have the choice to bake them on a cooking sheet in the oven, or you could put them on the stovetop and brown them off. I chose to do it in the oven, so I have this hands-on time. So I'm gonna go grab those meatballs. Okay, here they are. Here's the first half of my meatballs. Okay. Yep, that's the key factor is you have to spray your sheet before you put your meatballs on there. So they're going to stick if you don't do that. Okay. All right. Here's our mushroom and beef meatballs. Very simple flavor here. I didn't add any flavors that would not mix well with other dishes. So these meatballs, you can cook them up and freeze them into portions or like meal-sized portions if you don't want to use them right away. And then you could take them out and use them for whatever dish you want, or traditional meatballs and sauce, or whatever you like to use. This could be a really good addition to a soup. So there is the yummy meatballs. So they're baked at 400 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes. If you're using a cooking thermometer, you're going to take them out right around 160. So our beef is completely cooked. There we go. So there's our meatballs. Hands too hot for me to pick up. Let's move this back over here. Okay, onions and mushrooms are looking really good over here. Mushrooms are starting to look a little soft, and I've got some liquid accumulating in the pan. So that's exactly what we're looking for. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and add my garlic. The recipe calls for 4 cloves of garlic. My cloves were big, but I think that's a plus, so I still use 4. So let's talk about mushroom nutrition. So if you ask any type of question related to nutrition, like are they good for me? How do they support my immune system? All of these things are the answer yes. So mushrooms are fantastic for you. They actually have no calories and they have no fat. So we don't have to worry about any additional cholesterol or saturated fat that we could get from the meat that we use in these types of blended dishes. So we're going to reduce the amount of fat as we add the mushroom and not increase the amount of meat to make more servings. So that's a plus. They also can help you reduce the amount of salt in your dishes because of their savory flavor. And then I will say that they do not have a substantial amount of protein. They have a small amount. So these are not considered a meat replacement. You're not going to get protein from your mushrooms, but they mix in really well with any of your protein dishes. Okay. So the coolest thing about mushrooms is that they have vitamin D. So vitamin D is not normally found in your produce section of the grocery store. But what's really cool about them is that they absorb vitamin D from UV light. So commercially produced mushrooms that you find in a grocery store are grown indoors in these big tray pans, and they're under UV light. So those are going to be consistently soaking up the vitamin D from those lights. And also, if you're a forager or you know a mycologist who is an expert in choosing mushrooms in the wild that are okay to eat, those mushrooms are also going to have soaked up the vitamin D from the sun. So our mushrooms are going to have 8 times the amount of vitamin D that a fortified milk product has. That is a really substantial amount. So generally, people are low in vitamin D because they'll go outside. I mean, that's really it. They don't go outside, or they wear sunscreen 100% of the time, and they don't allow their skin the opportunity to absorb vitamin D from the sun. So, mushrooms are going to be a good option for you to help boost that vitamin D. Okay. These mushrooms and onions look so good. So my next step is going to add a little bit of chicken broth to create a sauce and to scrape up any bits off the bottom of the pan. This is called a deglaze. So you can use chicken broth, vegetable broth. You can use just a little bit of water. And if you want to, you could use milk, but I will buffer that by saying that the milk cannot be icy cold going straight into the pan. So if you're going to use milk, you want to take it out and measure it out and leave it out while you're prepping the rest of your dish. So it comes to room temperature a little bit, and it doesn't curdle when it hits the hot liquid. So if your milk has been out for just, since the beginning of your prep time, that will be better than using icy cold milk. Same thing goes for cream. So I'm going to add my broth. This is going to be, I chose a low sodium broth, as I usually do. Here we go. And then, last but not least, we're going to place our chicken back on top of the onions and mushrooms, and we're going to nestle it down in there in between all the vegetables in the pan, and we're going to allow the chicken to complete its cooking. So, I will say today, I used 2 chicken breasts, so about 1.5 pounds of meat, but as you see, I have 4 slices. So what I did was I took the really thick chicken breast and I sliced it this way, so I made 2 pieces per chicken breast. That reduces the cook time, so you don't have to wait so long for the thick portion of your chicken breast to cook, and you can make more portions out of it. So you could technically have cut it in half and then cut these halves into strips and make some like chicken tenders out of it, and you can spread that out a little bit more across the people that you're serving. So you've got some options here. You can also use chicken thighs, which is my favorite, because the white meat chicken can dry out really easily. That's why I like to do this slice and half method with the thick chicken breast, so it cooks a little more quickly, and it doesn't spend as much time on the heat and get really dried out. So we're going to add our chicken back to the pan. There we go. So if you're using the flour to dredge your chicken before you put it in the pan to brown it initially, The flour is going to contribute to thickening your sauce. So that's going to give you like a gravy type consistency for your chicken and mushrooms. And what's better than gravy? Especially mushroom gravy. It's even better when it's got savory mushrooms in it. Okay, so friends, we've got nutritious, low calorie, lots of vitamins and minerals and vitamin D in our mushrooms. So there's so many varieties that you can choose from. And while they're not all often available in the regular grocery store, check out your local farmer's market and see if you can find any special types of mushrooms. In particular, I'm thinking about lion's mane mushrooms and our king trumpet mushrooms. So king trumpets have a really thick stalk and a small little cap on the top, and they have a really meaty texture. So you could cut them up and they will almost they'll give you the texture and the feeling like you're eating scallops. So you could treat them like scallops. Lion's mane is this really interesting sort of like blob of a mushroom, and it kind of looks like hair the way the mushroom grows on the outside. And you can take that one and treat it like shredded crab meat and make crab cakes. So those two are really fun and interesting. If you ever come across them, I highly recommend it. The folks you're feeding will not know the difference because the flavor, the mushrooms, they soak it all up. So it will taste like whatever you want it to taste like. Okay, my friends. Does anyone have any questions in the chat box? I'd love to pick your brains. What's your favorite type of dish to eat with mushrooms? You can share that with me. Or are you a forager? Do you know how to go out into the woods and pick the mushrooms that are safe? I'd love to know what your favorite type of mushroom is that you can forage locally here in Georgia. Now, I'm going to repeat though, if you do not know, you do not have an expertise in foraging mushrooms, you need to find a friend who is a mycologist so they can keep you safe, because mushrooms are either fantastic or you're done if you eat it. So let's just be safe by not going into the woods and eating some wild mushrooms unless you're 100% sure. Okay? So I want you to take a visit to the Mushroom Council website. You can just type in Mushroom Council into your search bar, and they have so much extra information about mushrooms, including additional recipes. They've got your foundation on how to make your blend, which is the meat mushroom blend that I discussed here today, and then a ton of additional recipes. If you're into sustainability and reducing your footprint or eating less meat, mushrooms are your way to go. So take a look at their website and try some mushrooms the next time you see them in the grocery store or in your local food distribution. So, friends, thank you for joining us today. We'll be back in a couple weeks for our next episode. We're going to be rolling into February, which is Heart Health Month and Black History Month. So we've got some fun stuff in store for you then. In the meantime, try a mushroom, blend it into your ground meat dishes, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Thanks so much for joining. Bye. Oh no. There's someone else. Okay. Bye.